Every Saturday at 8 in the morning, my daughter called me for coffee over the phone. 11 years, never missed once. Last Saturday, silence. By Wednesday, after 9 unanswered calls, I drove 3 hours to her house in the rain. The driveway was empty. The front door was locked from inside. Then I heard my granddaughter crying in the shed out back, clutching my old fire helmet, like her life depended on it. It did. When I pulled open that shed door, the smell hit me first. Stale air, sweat, something sour and desperate that I recognized from decades of pulling people out of places they should never have been. My granddaughter Nora was curled up in a sleeping bag on the concrete floor. Her small body pressed into the far corner, like she was trying to disappear into the wall. She was holding my old fire helmet against her chest, both arms wrapped around it, knuckles white. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her skin had that grayish tint I had seen before on people running out of time. She looked up at me, and her eyes took a moment to focus, like she was surfacing from somewhere deep and dark. "Grandpa?" Her voice sounded like dry leaves scraping across pavement. Barely there. I dropped to my knees and gathered her into my arms. She weighed almost nothing, just bones and heat and the faint trembling of a body that had been fighting too long. When I pressed my hand to her forehead, the fever burned against my palm like a warning I had arrived almost too late to read. "I have got you, sweetheart." I whispered it into her hair, trying to keep my voice from breaking. "I have got you. You are safe now." She looked up at me, and in that moment, through the fever and the exhaustion, I saw something I will never forget. Relief. Pure, bottomless relief. Like a person who had been holding their breath underwater for 6 days and finally broke the surface. "Grandpa, you came." "Of course I came, sweetheart. Mommy said you would." She said firefighters never leave anyone behind. "I am truly grateful you are here with me right now. It means more than you know." Before we continue, tell me where you are listening from today. Drop your city or country in the comments so I can see how far this story is traveling. And can I ask you something personal? How old are you? I genuinely want to know who I am sharing these stories with. Just a gentle note. Parts of this story include fictionalized elements for storytelling and reflection. Any resemblance to real names or places is coincidental. But the message behind it is very real. And I hope it stays with you. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Walter Grady. Most people call me Walt. I am 66 years old. Retired firefighter. Living in a quiet neighborhood on the east side of Portland, Oregon, where the rain falls more days than it does not, and the Columbia River hums in the distance like something alive. For 38 years, I ran into burning buildings for a living. 38 years of reading smoke, tracing heat through walls, pulling people out of places that were trying to kill them. You spend that long around fire, you develop a sense for danger that never really turns off, even in retirement. Even sitting in your kitchen on a Saturday morning with nothing more threatening than a crossword puzzle, some part of your brain is always scanning, always listening for the alarm. I tell you this because it matters. Because everything that happened started with a feeling I could not ignore. The same feeling that saved lives on the job. That prickling at the base of your skull when something is wrong and your conscious mind has not caught up yet. Firefighters call it reading the fire. You learn to trust what you feel before you can see it. For 11 years, my Saturday mornings had a rhythm. I would wake at 6:30, brew a pot of coffee, strong and black the way I have taken it since the academy. I would settle into my kitchen chair, the one by the window that looks out over the backyard, where I keep a small garden that mostly grows weeds these days. And at 8 o'clock sharp, my phone would ring. Claire, my only daughter. She would call from her kitchen in Seattle, 200 miles north. I could always hear her coffee maker gurgling in the background, that fancy drip thing Garrett bought her that took 10 minutes to brew a single cup. She would say the same thing every time. "Morning, Dad. Coffee is ready. How is your week?" And we would talk. Sometimes for 20 minutes, sometimes for over an hour. She would tell me about her work at the accounting firm, the spreadsheets that did not balance, the clients who could not explain where their money went. I would tell her about my week, the garden, the leaky gutter I had been meaning to fix since last spring, how my neighbor Hank still insisted on mowing his lawn at 7 in the morning on Sundays. Then Nora would grab the phone. My granddaughter, 7 years old, brown eyes too big for her face, full of questions about everything. She was afraid of the dark, but brave about everything else. Grandpa, when can I come visit? Can we build something in the garage? Can you tell me a fire story? She loved my fire stories. I would tell her about the time we rescued a cat from the roof of a burning shed, or the night we saved the old theater on 5th Street. I left out the hard ones, the ones where we did not make it in time. She was 7. She did not need those stories yet. Those Saturday calls were not just phone calls. They were the heartbeat of my week, the thing that kept my retirement from feeling like a slow fade into nothing. 8 o'clock, every Saturday, rain or shine, without fail, until last Saturday. I was sitting in my kitchen chair, coffee cooling in my mug, the blue one Claire painted for me when she was 12, lopsided handle, faded letters that used to say "Number 1 Dad" before a decade of dishwasher cycles wore them down to ghosts. 7:58. I glanced at the clock above the stove. 2 minutes. The phone sat on the counter where it always sat. Silent. 8 o'clock came. 8:05. 8:15. I picked up the phone. Checked the screen. No missed calls. No messages. I dialed Claire's number, the one I had memorized the day she moved to Seattle 11 years ago. It rang 4 times. Then her voicemail. "Hi. You have reached Claire Grady Ashford. I cannot come to the phone right now, but leave a message, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Hey, sweetheart. It is Dad. Just checking in. Give me a call when you get a chance. Love you." I hung up, set the phone down, told myself she was busy. Maybe Nora had a soccer game. Maybe Claire slept in for once in her life. She worked hard, my daughter. Harder than anyone I knew. She would call back soon, except she always called on Saturdays. Always. Even when she was exhausted. Even when Nora was sick. Even the week after Garrett lost his temper over something stupid and Claire's voice sounded tight and thin on the phone like a wire pulled past its limit. 8 o'clock every Saturday. 11 years. I tried again at 9. Voicemail. 10. Voicemail. Noon. Voicemail. By the time the afternoon light started fading through my kitchen window, I had called 4 times. 4 calls, 4 voicemails. No answer. 38 years of firefighting taught me one thing above all else. Where there is smoke, there is fire. And this silence smelled like smoke. Sunday brought no answers. I called Claire at 8 in the morning, hoping she would pick up a day late and laugh and say, "Sorry, Dad. Lost track of time." Voicemail. I called at noon. Voicemail. I called at 6 in the evening while standing at my kitchen window watching the rain streak down the glass. And I listened to her recorded voice one more time. "Hi, you have reached Claire Grady Ashford." I knew that voice better than I knew my own. Hearing it on a recording, cheerful and untouchable, while the real Claire was somewhere I could not reach, made my chest feel like someone had laid a beam across it. Monday morning I called her office. The receptionist at Hartwell and Price Accounting answered with practiced brightness. "Hartwell and Price. How may I direct your call? I am looking for Claire Grady Ashford. I am her father." A pause. The clicking of a keyboard. "Mr. Grady. Claire took personal leave last Friday. She has not been in since. We assumed she would be back this week, but we have not heard from her. Personal leave." Claire did not take personal leave. In 8 years at that firm, she had used maybe half her vacation days. Her boss once told me at a company dinner that Claire could find a 2-cent error in a $1 million spreadsheet. That was my daughter. She did not just disappear without telling anyone. Did she say why? No, sir. She emailed Thursday evening, saying she needed a few personal days. That was the last we heard. I thanked her and hung up. My hands were steady, but something underneath them was not. That slow tremor that starts deep in the bones when your body knows something your brain is still trying to deny. Claire was a creature of order. She organized her spice rack alphabetically. She kept a color-coded calendar on the refrigerator. She labeled the leftovers in the freezer with the date they were made and the date they should be thrown out. A woman like that does not just vanish from her own life without leaving a trail. Unless someone erased the trail for her. I should tell you about Claire. Not the facts of her, the dates and degrees and job titles, but the heart of her. She was 35 years old. Brown hair she wore in a low ponytail most days. Quiet hands. Careful eyes that noticed things other people missed. Which is what made her so good at her job. And so good at being a mother. When Nora was born, Claire held her daughter like she was holding a problem she had already solved. No panic. Just calm. Steady certainty that she knew exactly what to do. She had my attention to detail. And her mother's patience. My late wife, Sarah, died when Claire was 19. Breast cancer. Quick and merciless. Claire handled the funeral arrangements because I could not. She was 19 years old, organizing the service, the flowers, the food, all of it. Because her father was sitting in a fire station break room crying into his hands. After that, Claire took care of everything. Took care of me through my grief. Put herself through college. Took care of everyone around her with a quiet competence that most people never even noticed. That is the kind of person who was missing. Not someone who would run away on a whim. Someone who planned everything. Someone who never left a loose end. And Nora, 7 years old, built like a bird, all elbows and knees and enormous brown eyes that took up half her face. Scared of the dark since she was 3. Claire bought her a nightlight shaped like a crescent moon. But even that was not enough most nights. When Nora visited me in Portland, she slept with the hallway light on and my old fire helmet on the pillow beside her. She said it made her feel safe, said it smelled like Grandpa. She loved building things in my garage. How to use a tape measure. How to sand wood smooth. How to hammer a nail straight. She had good hands. Steady and patient, like her mother. But it was the fire stories she loved most. Every night before bed, she would curl up on the couch and say, "Grandpa, tell me about a fire." When I finished, she always asked the same question. "Were you scared?" "Every time, sweetheart. But you still went in?" "That is the job. You go in even when you are scared. Especially when you are scared." That was our ritual. The thing that bound a retired firefighter to a 7-year-old girl afraid of the dark. She believed I was brave, and I could not stand the thought of her being alone somewhere, scared, waiting for someone to come. Monday afternoon, I called Garrett. He answered on the 3rd ring. Smooth and easy, the way it always was. Garrett Ashford had the kind of voice that sold things. Confidence. Trust. He managed a mid-size investment fund downtown, and from the day I met him, his voice had sounded like a commercial for something expensive. "Walt. Hey. Everything all right? That is what I am trying to figure out." I kept my tone level. "I have been calling Claire since Saturday. Her phone goes straight to voicemail. Her office says she took personal leave without explaining." "What is going on?" A pause. Not long. Maybe half a second. But I caught it. After 38 years of listening for sounds that did not belong, you learn to hear the spaces between words. "Oh, right. I should have called you. Claire took Nora to visit a college friend in San Francisco. Last-minute thing. She needed a break. You know how she gets when work piles up. A break." Claire. The woman who once worked a 14-hour day with a 102-degree fever because the quarterly audit was due. "When is she coming back?" "Few days. Maybe by the weekend. I will have her call you as soon as they get home. Put Nora on the phone. They are not here, Walt. They are in San Francisco. Then give me the friend's number. I will call Claire there. Another pause. Longer. I do not have it offhand. Let me find it and text it to you. He never texted it. I hung up and stood in my kitchen staring at the phone. Something was wrong with that conversation. Not the words. The words were fine. Reasonable. A wife visiting a friend. A husband relaying information. Normal. But the delivery was too clean. Too polished. Like a report rewritten so many times, every rough edge had been sanded away. In my years on the job, I learned to listen for what a fire was telling me. Not just the roar and crackle, but the undertones. The way heat shifted when a wall was about to collapse. You did not listen to the fire with your ears. You listened with everything you had. Garrett's voice sounded like an engine running on the wrong fuel. The rhythm was right. The tone was right. But underneath, something was misfiring. Something was off. I just could not see the flames yet. I called Trish Nakamura that evening. If anyone knew where Claire was, it would be Trish. They had been best friends since Claire's first week at Hartwell and Price 8 years ago. Trish was an auditor at the same firm, sharp and honest. The kind of woman who said what she meant and meant what she said. Claire trusted her more than anyone outside of family. Trish answered on the second ring. Her voice was already tight before I said a word. Like she had been waiting for this call. Mr. Grady. Is Claire with you? That question told me everything and nothing at the same time. No, I said. I was hoping you could tell me where she is. The silence on the other end lasted 3 seconds. 3 seconds is a long time when your daughter is missing. I have not heard from her since last Wednesday, Trish said. She sounded scared. We had lunch together. She seemed distracted. I asked if everything was okay. She said she was just tired. Then Thursday, she emailed the office saying she needed personal days, and after that, nothing. I have called her maybe 10 times. Texts. Voicemails. Nothing. Have you been to the house? I drove by Thursday evening after work. Trish paused. Lights were off. No car in the driveway. The curtains were all drawn. I knocked, but nobody answered. I almost called the police, but I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe she really did need time away. My stomach dropped. 3 sources. 3 different stories. The office said personal leave without explanation. Garrett said San Francisco to visit a friend, and Trish, Claire's closest friend, had not heard from her and found an empty house with drawn curtains. In firefighting, we call it triangulation. You read the smoke from 3 different angles to find where the fire is burning. Right now, all 3 angles pointed to the same conclusion. Something had happened inside that house, and somebody was working very hard to keep anyone from looking too close. Trish, I said carefully, has Claire mentioned anything about Garrett lately? Anything unusual? Another pause. This one felt heavier. She has been different the last few months. Quieter. She lost weight. I asked her once if things were okay at home, and she changed the subject so fast it gave me whiplash. Then about 2 months ago, she came to work with a bruise on her wrist, said she bumped it on a cabinet door. I did not push it. I should have pushed it. Thank you, Trish, I said. If you hear from her, call me immediately. Day or night. I will. Mr. Grady, please find her. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time. The coffee in my mug had gone cold hours ago. The house was quiet, except for the rain tapping against the window and the low hum of the refrigerator. The kind of quiet that fills up a room when something important is missing from it. I thought about Garrett. Not the version of Garrett that showed up to family dinners with a bottle of wine and a firm handshake. Not the version who smiled for photographs and asked about my garden. The other version. The one I had been glimpsing in pieces over the past year. The way you sometimes glimpse a fire through the cracks in a wall before the whole thing breaks through. 6 months ago, I drove down to Seattle for Nora's 7th birthday. Garrett was in the kitchen when I arrived. He had lost weight. Not the healthy kind. The kind that comes from not sleeping, from stress eating into you like rot in a support beam. His eyes were rimmed red. And when I asked how business was going, he looked past my shoulder instead of at me. "Great," he said. "Really strong quarter. Lots of new clients." But his jaw was clenched when he said it. And he changed the subject before I could ask a follow-up question. Later that evening, after cake and presents, I sat on the back porch with Nora. She was eating a second slice of birthday cake. Chocolate frosting smeared on her chin, her feet swinging off the edge of the step because they did not quite reach the ground. "Grandpa," she said in that matter-of-fact way kids have when they are about to tell you something heavy without realizing it. "Daddy yells at Mommy about money when he thinks I am asleep." I looked at her. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" She shrugged and took another bite of cake. "Late at night sometimes. He gets really loud. Mommy tells him to be quiet because of me, but he does not always listen." She looked up at me with those enormous brown eyes. "Is Daddy in trouble?" I should have pressed her. Should have walked back into that kitchen and asked Garrett what exactly he was yelling about at midnight, while his 7-year-old daughter lay awake listening through the walls. But I told myself it was normal. Married couples argue about money. It did not mean anything dangerous. I patted her head and said everything was fine. Sitting in my kitchen now, 9 days later, I wanted to go back to that porch and shake myself. Everything was not fine. Everything had been on fire for months, and I had stood there watching the smoke curl up from the cracks and told myself it was just steam. 4 months ago, I visited again. Garrett barely made eye contact the entire weekend. He left the room every time his phone rang, which was often. Claire looked tired. Not regular tired, the kind of tired that settles behind your eyes and never fully leaves. The kind I had seen on the faces of people living in houses with something wrong that they could not fix and could not escape. I asked Claire if she was okay. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Just busy, Dad. You know how it is." I knew how it was. I also knew what it looked like when someone was telling you what they thought you needed to hear instead of the truth. Tuesday night. 9:17 in the evening. I dialed Claire's number for the 9th time. 4 rings. Then her voicemail. That cheerful voice, steady and warm. Belonging to a woman I could not find. I set the phone down. 9 calls into the void. 9 times, hearing my daughter's voice on a recording, while the real her was somewhere in the dark. I did not try a 10th time. Instead, I went upstairs and pulled my overnight bag from the closet. Packed 2 days of clothes, medications, phone charger, and the spare key Claire had given me 3 years ago when she moved into the house on Birchwood Lane. She had pressed it into my hand at the front door and said, "Just in case, Dad. For emergencies." This was an emergency. I set my alarm for 4:30 in the morning and lay down in bed. But I did not sleep. I stared at the ceiling and listened to the rain, and I thought about all the fires I had walked into over 38 years. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. Every single time. There was a moment right before you crossed the threshold when your body screamed at you to turn around. And every single time, you went in anyway. Because someone on the other side needed you. Tomorrow I would drive to Seattle. And if Claire was fine, if she was really in San Francisco drinking coffee with a college friend, then I would be the foolish old man who drove 3 hours in the rain for nothing. I could live with foolish. What I could not live with was sitting here while that smoke kept thickening. I left Portland before the sun had the nerve to show itself. 5 in the morning, Wednesday. Highway. I-5 stretched north into the dark, like a hallway with no lights and no end. Rain came down in sheets, the kind of Pacific Northwest rain that does not fall so much as arrive and refuse to leave. My wipers beat a steady rhythm against the windshield. My thermos of coffee sat in the cup holder going cold. I did not touch it. My hand stayed on the wheel. 3 hours to Seattle. I had made this drive hundreds of times. Holidays. Birthdays. The day Nora was born. When I broke every speed limit between Portland and the hospital because Claire called me at 2 in the morning and said, "Dad, she is coming. Get here." I made it in 2 hours and 20 minutes that night. Walked into the delivery room, still wearing the shirt I had fallen asleep in. But this morning, the familiar highway felt different. The white lines blurred in the rain. The mile markers crawled past, like they were counting something heavier than distance. My mind would not stop circling, pulling up memories I had not thought about in years, examining them under a light that made everything look different. Claire at 6 years old. Career day at her elementary school, and I had brought her to Station 14 for the afternoon. She was so small, the helmet slid down over her eyes every time she moved her head. She sat in the front seat of the engine, feet dangling a foot above the floor, hands gripping the steering wheel like she was driving the thing. "Daddy, do you ever get scared?" I looked at her. Brown eyes peering out from under the rim of a helmet that weighed almost as much as she did. "Every time, sweetheart." She thought about that for a moment, the way kids do when they are working something out. "Then why do you still go in?" "Because someone on the other side needs me. And being scared does not mean you stop. It means you pay attention." She nodded. Slowly, seriously, like I had handed her something important, and she was deciding where to put it. I did not know then that she would carry those words for the rest of her life, that she would pass them on to her own daughter in a shed behind her house, rephrased but unmistakable. Firefighters never leave anyone behind. Claire at 22. Graduation day. Bachelor of Science in Accounting, magna cum laude. She stood outside the auditorium in her cap and gown, holding her diploma like she was not quite sure it was real. 3 years after her mother died, 3 years of working 2 jobs and studying past midnight, and she had done it without asking anyone for help. Because that was Claire. She figured things out on her own. "I want to find where the numbers do not add up, Dad," she said, squinting into the afternoon sun. "Like you find where the fire starts. Trace it back to the source." I was so proud of her that day. Proud and sad at the same time, because Sarah should have been there to see it. Should have been the one adjusting Claire's cap and taking photographs. Instead, it was just me and a disposable camera and a lump in my throat the size of a fist. Claire at 24. The wedding. A small church outside Seattle on an October afternoon, leaves turning gold and red along the path to the front door. I walked her down the aisle with her hand trembling on my arm. She was nervous, which surprised me. Claire was not the nervous type. At the altar, Garrett stood in a charcoal suit that fit like it had been designed for a magazine cover. He smiled when he saw Claire, but something about that smile had always bothered me. It was too wide, too rehearsed. He smiled at the guests the way a man smiles when he wants to be remembered for smiling. And when he turned to Claire to say his vows, the smile did not change. Same wattage, same angle. Like a man performing sincerity instead of feeling it. I mentioned it to Claire the week before the wedding. Carefully. The way you mention to someone that you think maybe, possibly, you smelled gas in their house. "Dad, I love him," she said. Is that not enough? It should have been. I told myself it was. I shook Garrett's hand and smiled for the photographs and kept my doubts behind my teeth where they belonged. What kind of father ruins his daughter's happiness over a feeling he cannot explain? The kind of father who should have trusted his instincts. That is what kind. A memory from 3 months ago surfaced. The last time I visited, Saturday evening, Nora was asleep upstairs, and Claire and I sat on the back porch in the dark. The air smelled like wet, grass, and cedar. Claire was quiet for a long time, which was unusual. Claire filled silences the way she filled spreadsheets, methodically. Then she said something that had not made sense at the time, but now echoed through my skull like an alarm bell. Dad, if anything ever happens to me, take care of Nora. Promise me. I looked at her. What do you mean? If anything happens. She did not meet my eyes. Just, you know, life is unpredictable. I want to know Nora will be okay. That you will be there. Of course I will be there. Always. But Claire, why are you talking like this? She shook her head and forced a smile that did not belong on her face. Forget it. I am just tired. Ignore me. I did not ignore it. But I did not push it either. I let it sit between us in the dark like an unlit match, telling myself it was nothing. Just a young mother being cautious. Just Claire being Claire. Planning for every possibility. Except now, driving through the rain on I-5 with 9 unanswered calls behind me and an empty house ahead of me, those words sounded different. They sounded like a woman who knew something was coming, who had looked at the road in front of her and seen the cliff at the end of it. If anything ever happens to me. Not if something happens to us. Not if something happens to the family. To me. Specifically, my phone sat silent in the cup holder. I picked it up and dialed Garrett one more time. 4 rings. Voicemail. This is Garrett Ashford. Leave a message. Garrett, it is Walt. I am on my way to the house. I will be there in less than an hour. If Claire and Nora are home, have Claire call me immediately. And if they are still on this trip to San Francisco, I am going to need proof. A photograph. A video call. Something. Because right now, nothing you have told me adds up. I hung up and set the phone down. The highway sign ahead glowed in my headlights. Seattle. 47 miles. 47 miles between me and whatever was waiting inside that house. I pressed the accelerator down. The speedometer climbed past 70. Past 75. The rain hammered the windshield like it was trying to warn me. In 38 years of firefighting, I learned that by the time you can see the flames, the fire has already done its worst damage. The real destruction happens in the walls, behind the surfaces, in the spaces nobody thinks to check. By the time the flames break through, you are not preventing damage. You are just trying to survive it. I was 3 hours away from my daughter's house, and I had the terrible feeling I was already days too late. I turned onto Birchwood Lane at 10:47 in the morning. The rain had eased to a drizzle, and the neighborhood sat quiet under a low gray sky. Maple Ridge was the kind of subdivision where every house looked like a cousin of the one next door. White siding, trimmed lawns, 2-car garages. The kind of street where nothing bad was supposed to happen. Number 4712 sat in the middle of the block. I pulled over across the street and killed the engine. For a long moment, I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, staring at my daughter's house. The mailbox door was hanging open, envelopes spilling out of the slot. Days of mail, maybe a full week. The lawn needed mowing. The flower bed along the front walk was wilting, petunias drooping with their heads down, begging for water nobody had given them. No car in the driveway. Garrett's black BMW was gone. Claire's gray Subaru was gone. The garage door was closed. Every curtain in every window was drawn tight. The house looked like it had its eyes shut. I crossed the street and climbed the porch steps. Knocked 3 times. Hard enough that the sound echoed through the front hall and bounced off walls with nothing to land on. Nothing. Claire. Nora. It is Dad. A dog barked somewhere down the block. From inside the house, nothing. Just the low hum of a refrigerator, keeping itself alive while everyone had disappeared. 2 years ago, Claire locked herself out while taking the recycling to the curb. Before I could start on the lock, she laughed and walked to the porch railing, where a row of terracotta planters sat in a neat line. She tilted the third one from the left and pulled out a key taped to the bottom. Old habit, Dad. You always said keep an exit strategy. I stepped to the railing, tilted the third planter. The key was still there, held by a strip of weathered tape. It fell into my palm. My hand trembled as I slid it into the deadbolt. The lock turned with a click that sounded too final, like stepping through a doorway I could not step back out of. In 38 years of firefighting, I had kicked down hundreds of doors. Every time there was a half-second pause where your brain cataloged everything. Temperature, smoke, sound. You read the signs before you committed. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. Not decay, not blood. The sharp chemical bite of bleach, layered underneath the stale air of a house sealed up too long. In my experience, the only people who scrub a house with that concentration of bleach are the ones who need to hide what was there before. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The living room looked almost normal. Almost. But 38 years of reading fire scenes had trained my eyes to see what was wrong before I could name it. The coffee table was 2 inches to the left of where the carpet impressions showed it usually sat. Like someone had shoved it aside and then put it back without checking the marks. The couch cushions were arranged with a precision that no family with a 7-year-old achieves naturally. Perfectly aligned. Perfectly fluffed. The kind of perfect that comes from someone straightening up in a panic. A throw pillow lay on the floor behind the armchair. Kicked there and forgotten. The family photographs on the mantel were tilted at angles Claire would never have tolerated. The carpet showed vacuum lines running in overlapping, erratic directions instead of the neat parallel rows Claire always made. Someone had cleaned this room in a hurry. Someone who did not know the patterns. After a fire, people try to make everything look normal. They straighten what they can. They sweep the ash. They open windows. But fire always leaves its signature if you know where to look. A scorch mark behind a frame. A warped floorboard. The faint smell of smoke in the curtains. This room had that same energy. The energy of a space rearranged to hide what had happened inside it. "Claire," I called out. My voice sounded wrong in the empty house. "Nora." No answer. The kitchen was spotless. Counters gleaming. Sink scrubbed. Stovetop clean enough to reflect my face. But when I opened the refrigerator, my stomach turned. Beer bottles. 2 containers of Chinese takeout. A half-empty gallon of milk expired 5 days ago. And nothing else. No juice boxes. No yogurt cups. No string cheese. No leftover pasta in a container labeled with a date in Claire's handwriting. Nothing a 7-year-old would eat. Nothing a mother would keep stocked for her daughter. Garrett had been living here alone. Nora's room was worse in a different way. The door was closed. I opened it slowly. Pink curtains. Stuffed animals on shelves. Her backpack in the corner, with school folders visible. Sneakers by the bed. Jacket on the closet door. Everything a 7-year-old needed for her daily life was still here. Wherever Nora was, she had not packed. The bed was made with hospital corners. Pillow centered. Comforter smooth. A 7-year-old did not make a bed like that. An adult had done this. An adult who wanted everything to look normal. I stood in the center of my granddaughter's bedroom, surrounded by her drawings taped to the wall and her nightlight shaped like a crescent moon still plugged in by the baseboard. And I felt it. That old, bone-deep certainty that had saved my life more times than I could count. I was standing in the middle of a crime scene. Somebody had scrubbed this house. Straightened the furniture, vacuumed the carpets, made the beds, drew every curtain to keep the neighbors from looking in, and then somebody had left. I walked back downstairs. The bleach smell was strongest near the living room, concentrated around the couch and the carpet in front of it. Whatever had happened, it had happened there. I was reaching for my phone to call the police when I heard it. From the backyard. Through the kitchen window. Faint enough that the rain almost swallowed it. But I heard it the way I had spent a lifetime hearing sounds other people missed. The way you hear a voice calling from inside a burning building when everyone else hears only fire. A child crying. I moved through the kitchen and out the back door before my mind had time to tell my legs what to do. The backyard was small. A square of wet grass, A rusted swing set Nora had outgrown, and at the far end, against the wooden fence, a shed. It was nothing special from the outside. Maybe 8 feet by 10. Weathered gray planks, a sloped roof, a single window covered by a piece of plywood from the inside. The kind of structure people used for storing lawnmowers and Christmas decorations, but the crying was coming from inside it. I crossed the yard in 4 strides. The grass was slick under my boots. When I reached the shed door, I stopped, pressed my hand flat against the wood. It was cold, damp from the rain. I could hear the crying more clearly now. Not loud, not the wailing of a child throwing a tantrum. This was something quieter, something more exhausted. The sound of someone who had been crying for so long they barely had the energy to keep going, but could not figure out how to stop. Nora? I kept my voice as steady as I could. Sweetheart, it is Grandpa. It is Walt. Can you hear me? The crying stopped. Silence. Then a sound that nearly buckled my knees. A small, hoarse voice behind the door. Grandpa, I am right here, honey. Can you open the door? A pause. Then the scraping of something metal. A latch, sliding slowly. The way small hands move when they are shaking too hard to grip properly. The door cracked open an inch. Then 2. Then enough for the gray morning light to fall inside. What I saw stopped me cold. Claire had transformed this shed. This was not a storage unit anymore. This was a survival station. Along the back wall, neatly arranged on a low shelf, sat 6 bottles of water, 4 granola bars still in their wrappers, a box of animal crackers, and a sleeve of peanut butter crackers. Beside them, a flashlight, a pack of batteries, a small first aid kit, and 2 coloring books with a box of crayons. A sleeping bag was spread across the concrete floor. A pillow from Nora's bed. 2 children's books stacked in the corner, and on a hook by the door hung my old fire helmet. The one from Station 14. The one I had retired with and given to Nora because she said it made her feel safe. Except the helmet was not on the hook. It was on the floor, cradled in the arms of my granddaughter. Nora was curled in the far corner of the sleeping bag, knees drawn to her chest. My helmet clutched against her like a shield. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her skin had a grayish pallor I had seen too many times on victims pulled from collapsed buildings. Her hair was matted. Her eyes, when they found mine, were glassy and unfocused, like someone looking at the world through water. She was 7 years old. She weighed maybe 50 pounds on a good day. Right now, she looked like she weighed less than the helmet she was holding. I dropped to my knees and crawled into that shed. When I gathered her into my arms, she felt like paper, like something the wind could take. Her skin burned against mine, fever radiating through her thin pajama top. She smelled like sweat and dust and fear. When I pressed my hand to her forehead, the heat scared me more than any fire I had ever faced. I got you, sweetheart. I pulled her against my chest and felt her fingers dig into my shirt. Weak, desperate. The grip of someone who had been holding on for so long their hands had forgotten how to let go. I got you. You are safe now. She did not cry. She was past crying. She just pressed her face into my shoulder and breathed. Each breath was shallow and ragged, like her lungs had to work twice as hard for half the air. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. My voice did not sound like my own when the dispatcher answered. I need an ambulance. 4712 Birchwood Lane. My granddaughter is 7 years old. Severe dehydration. High fever. She has been alone for days. Please hurry. I gave them the rest of the information while holding Nora against my chest. Her heartbeat was fast and faint against my ribs, like a bird trapped in a box. The paramedics arrived in 11 minutes. It felt like 11 hours. 2 of them. A man and a woman. Both young. Both moving with the kind of controlled urgency that told me they understood this was serious. They transferred Nora to a stretcher, hooked up an oxygen mask, started an IV line in the ambulance. The female paramedic looked at me as she adjusted the drip. How long has she been alone? I do not know yet. Days. Maybe longer. She did not say anything else. She did not need to. Her face said it all. The ride to Seattle Children's Hospital took 18 minutes. Nora drifted in and out of consciousness, her small hand gripping mine like I was the last solid thing in her world. I did not let go. Not when they transferred her to the emergency room. Not when the doctors surrounded her with monitors and IV bags and called out numbers I did not understand. Not when a young nurse tried to gently pull me back to give them space. I am not leaving her, I said. A doctor with gray hair and steady hands looked at me over the top of his glasses. Stay against the wall. Do not get in the way. I pressed myself into the corner and watched them work. Blood pressure. Temperature. Blood draws. More fluids. The numbers on the monitors slowly improved. The tension in the room gradually eased. After 40 minutes, they moved Nora to a private room. The IV drip continued its rhythm. Monitors beeped softly. I pulled a chair to her bedside and sat down. My whole body ached. Not from the drive, not from the hours on my feet, from holding myself together when everything inside me was trying to come apart. 6 days. The doctors estimated she had been alone for 6 days based on her dehydration levels and the food remaining in the shed. My 7-year-old granddaughter had survived 6 days alone in a shed because her mother had turned it into a lifeboat. Nora stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, clearer now, more focused. She looked at me, and I saw recognition, real recognition, for the first time since I had found her. Grandpa, you came. Of course I came, sweetheart. Her gaze drifted to the fire helmet. They had let her keep it. It sat on the bedside table, scuffed and dented, the old Station 14 decal peeling at the edges. She looked at it, then back at me. Mommy said you would come. She said firefighters never leave anyone behind. She did not tell me everything that first night. She was too weak, too dehydrated. The doctors said her body needed rest more than anything else, so I sat in that chair beside her bed, and I watched her sleep. The IV drip counted the seconds. The monitors beeped their small reassurances. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting fluids, giving me looks that carried something between sympathy and horror. I did not sleep. I sat there, and I watched my granddaughter breathe, and I thanked God for every breath she took. By Thursday morning, the color had started to come back to her face. The IV fluids were doing their work. She ate a cup of applesauce and drank 2 glasses of water and asked for more. And the nurse smiled and said that was a very good sign. When the nurse left, Nora looked at me with those brown eyes, clearer now, more like the eyes I knew. And she started talking, not because anyone asked her to, because she needed to. Mommy started teaching me things a few months ago, she said. Her voice was still hoarse, but steadier than the day before. She said it was like a game, a secret game just for us. What kind of game, sweetheart? Nora picked at the edge of her hospital blanket. She said if I ever heard really loud arguing, scary arguing, I should go to my fire station. The shed. She called it my fire station because of you, Grandpa. My throat tightened. Go on. She showed me where she hid the food. The water bottles and the granola bars and the animal crackers. She said I should eat just a little bit each day. Not all at once. She said I had to make it last because she did not know how long I might need to stay. I stared at my granddaughter, 7 years old, sitting in a hospital bed, explaining her mother's survival plan with the calm, matter-of-fact tone of someone describing the rules of a board game. Claire had rehearsed this with her, had drilled it into her gently, lovingly, turning terror into a game so her daughter would not freeze when the moment came. What about water? I asked. The bottles would only last a few days. Nora nodded. Mommy showed me. There is a faucet on the side of the shed. Outside, near the bottom. She said at night, when the house was really quiet, I could sneak out and fill up my water bottle. But I had to be fast, and I had to go back inside before it got light. She paused, looked down at her hands. I was so scared every time, Grandpa. It was dark outside. And you know I do not like the dark. I know, sweetheart, but Mommy said being brave does not mean you are not scared. It means you do the scary thing anyway, because you have to. She said you taught her that. My eyes burned. I had to look away for a moment. Blink hard. Breathe. Claire had taken my words from 30 years ago, from a 6-year-old girl sitting in a fire engine, asking if her daddy ever got scared, and she had given them to her own daughter as armor. What else did Mommy teach you? I asked when I could trust my voice again. She said to put on your helmet. Nora glanced at the fire helmet on the bedside table. She said when I wore it, I should pretend you were right there with me. She said the helmet had kept you safe for a really long time, and it would keep me safe too. I reached over and touched the helmet. The old Station 14 decal was peeling. The plastic was scuffed and dented from decades of use. It had been through hundreds of fires with me, and now it had been through something worse with my granddaughter. Nora continued. Her voice got smaller. She said if you did not call on Saturday, you would come looking for me. She said you always keep your promises. She told me to wait for you, Grandpa. Nobody else, just you. She said you would know something was wrong and you would come. The weight of those words pressed against my chest like a steel beam. Claire had built her entire emergency plan around me, around the Saturday coffee call. She knew that if she could not call me, I would notice. I would investigate. I would drive to Seattle, and I would not stop until I found Nora. She had known this about me, the way she knew everything about numbers and patterns and the things that did not add up. She had looked at her own father and calculated, with the precision of an accountant and the love of a mother, exactly what I would do. And she had been right. Nora, I said carefully. What happened on Friday night? Can you tell me what you heard? Her face changed. The calm, factual tone she had been using slipped. Something darker moved behind her eyes. I was reading in bed. It was late. After dinner. Then the front door opened, and Daddy came in with somebody. A man. They were loud. Daddy was yelling at Mommy about money. The man was yelling too. Mommy told them to stop. She told them to leave. She swallowed. Then Mommy screamed my name. She yelled, Nora, go to your fire station. Now. So I did. I ran out the back door and I went to the shed, and I locked it from inside like she taught me. Good girl. You did exactly right. I could hear them through the window. Nora's voice dropped to a whisper. Mommy was crying. She was begging them to stop. She kept saying, please, please, not in front of. But she did not finish. Then there was a loud sound, like something falling. And then Mommy stopped making any sound at all. The room was very quiet. The IV drip counted the seconds. The monitor beeped. After that I heard footsteps. Heavy ones. Moving around downstairs. Then a dragging sound. Like something being pulled across the floor. Then the front door opened and closed. And a car drove away. Then another car. Then nothing. I wanted to go back inside, Grandpa. I wanted to find Mommy. But she told me never to do that. She said, Nora, never go back into a burning building. Those were her exact words. She made me promise. I closed my eyes. Claire had used my language. The language of firefighting. The words I had lived by for 38 years. She had converted into instructions for her daughter. Never go back into a burning building. It was the first rule every firefighter learned. And Claire had given it to Nora as a final command. The last instruction from a mother who knew she was not going to survive. So I stayed, Nora said. I stayed in the shed. I ate a little bit of food every day like Mommy said. I drank water at night. I wore your helmet. And I waited for you. She looked at me. 6 days, Grandpa. I counted. 6 days. My 7-year-old granddaughter had survived 6 days alone in a shed because her mother had spent months preparing her for the worst. Claire had hidden food, rehearsed instructions, chosen a location, built a plan around the one person she trusted absolutely. She had done everything she could to save Nora. Everything except save herself. "You did so good, sweetheart." I took her hand. It was small and warm and alive. "Your mama would be so proud of you." Nora's eyes started to close, the medication and exhaustion finally winning. Her grip on my hand loosened. Within minutes, she was asleep. I sat in that dim hospital room and listened to my granddaughter breathe. The fire helmet sat on the bedside table, battered and old, keeping watch the way it always had. And I thought about Claire, my brave, brilliant daughter, who had looked into the darkness and instead of running, had built a lighthouse for her child. She had not been able to save herself, but she had saved Nora. And now it was my turn to finish what she started. Every fire I ever fought left a signature. Grease fires smelled like burnt popcorn and regret. Electrical fires had that sharp copper bite that hit the back of your throat. Structure fires, the big ones, left a taste like pennies and ash that lingered for days. But the fire burning inside my granddaughter's memory had no smell, no smoke, no flame. It lived only in the trembling tip of a purple crayon. Thursday morning, day 2 at Seattle Children's. Nora had graduated from the IV drip to soft foods applesauce, chicken broth, small bites of toast she nibbled like a bird testing seeds. Her color was returning. The dark circles under her eyes had faded from charcoal to faint lavender. Dr. Martinez said her kidney function was stabilizing. Physically, she was climbing out of the hole, but her eyes still carried something heavy. Something a 7-year-old's eyes should never carry. Dr. Angela Kim arrived at 9:15. She was the hospital's child psychologist, a small woman, maybe 5'2", with reading glasses perched on her head and a canvas bag filled with crayons and thick drawing paper. She pulled me aside in the hallway. "Mr. Grady, children process trauma differently than adults. They store it in images, sounds, physical sensations. I'm not going to ask Nora direct questions. I'm going to let her draw." I nodded. In the fire academy, they taught us that victims pulled from burning buildings sometimes couldn't speak for hours. Shock locked the words inside their chests, like smoke trapped in a sealed room. You had to open the windows slowly. Dr. Kim sat beside Nora on the bed, cross-legged, and spread the paper and crayons across the blanket like a picnic. She drew her own pictures, first a cat, a house, a sun with a smiley face making small comments. "I like cats. Do you like cats?" Nora shook her head. "Dogs?" A tiny nod. "Me too." Secretly. Then Nora reached for a purple crayon, her favorite color, the same shade Claire had painted Nora's bedroom walls 2 years ago. I remembered that weekend. Claire had called me laughing, saying Nora insisted on purple because it was the color of magic and bravery. Now the memory cut like glass. Nora drew a house. Triangle roof, square door, 2 windows. Standard. But in the upper left corner, she added orange and red streaks, jagged, aggressive lines that looked like fire consuming the sky. In front of the house, 3 stick figures. One tall with brown hair, one medium with yellow hair, one small with black hair. The tall figure and the medium figure were connected by a red line. The small figure stood alone, separated by a thick black wall. "Can you tell me about this picture?" Dr. Kim asked softly. Nora pointed to the tall figure. "That's Daddy." The medium one. "That's the man." The small one behind the black wall. "That's me." My chest tightened. Dr. Kim had instructed me observe. Don't interrupt. "Does the man have a name?" Nora pressed the purple tip against a fresh corner and wrote 4 shaky letters. M-A-R-C. "Is Mark someone you've seen before?" Nora nodded slowly. "He came to the house. At night, when Mommy was sleeping, he and Daddy talked in the kitchen. They were whispering. Daddy gave him an envelope. An envelope. Night visits. Whispering. This wasn't a marital dispute. This was planning. How many times did Mark come to your house? 3 fingers. And what happened the last time? Nora put the purple crayon down and picked up a black one. On a fresh sheet, she drew the house again. But now fire streaks covered the entire sky. Daddy stood at the front door. Mark stood behind the house, and the small figure was inside a tiny rectangle with a circle on one side. A closet. She had drawn herself locked inside the closet. Between the closet and the rest of the house, she drew a single figure lying flat on the ground. Yellow hair. A red circle near the head. Dr. Kim's hand paused over her notepad. She glanced at me. I saw the recognition. She understood exactly what Nora had drawn. A body on the floor. Blood near the head. Nora, this is a very brave drawing, Dr. Kim said gently. Nora picked up the purple crayon one last time. At the bottom of the page, in unsteady 7-year-old handwriting, she wrote, "Mommy said hide." 3 words. 3 words that confirmed everything I feared and destroyed the last fragment of hope I had been carrying like a cracked lantern through the dark. Claire knew something was coming. She had time to tell Nora to hide, but not enough time to save herself. I walked to the window and pressed my forehead against the cold glass. Rain streaked the pane in thin diagonal lines, like the scratch marks on the inside of that shed door. Behind me, Dr. Kim placed Nora's drawings into clear plastic sleeves. She would catalog them, document them, and hand them directly to Detective Vasquez as evidence. A 7-year-old's crayon drawings would become part of a murder case file. "Grandpa," Nora whispered. "Is Mommy coming back?" I sat on the edge of her bed and took her small hand in both of mine. Every part of me wanted to wrap her in a beautiful, painless lie. But firefighters don't lie about what the fire has already taken. "I don't know yet, sweetheart. But I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere." She leaned into my chest. The purple crayon fell onto the blanket between us. That night, after Nora fell asleep, Detective Vasquez called. Her voice was sharper than before, more urgent. "Mr. Grady." We ran the name. There's no Mark in Garrett's known associates, but there is a Marcus. Marcus Hale, age 31. Record includes assault, fraud, 1 dismissed arson charge in Tacoma. Off the radar 8 months. Arson. The word landed in my stomach like a swallowed coal. "And the forensic team found something at the house," she continued. "Under the carpet where your son-in-law cleaned. Luminol lit up like a Christmas tree. Someone bled in that room. A lot." I closed my eyes. The sealed room. The invisible smoke. It was all becoming visible now. One terrible detail at a time. "We're going to find her, Mr. Grady," Vasquez said. I didn't answer, because I already knew they weren't looking for a living person anymore. In 31 years on the job, I learned that fire speaks. It tells you where it started, how it moved, what it consumed. You just have to know how to read it. A V pattern on a wall points to the origin. Charring depth reveals duration. Melted copper means the temperature exceeded 2,000 degrees. Every fire leaves a confession written in soot and ruin if you have the patience to translate it. Murder, I was learning, works the same way. Friday morning, Detective Vasquez called me at 7:45. I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria with a cup of coffee that tasted like hot cardboard. Nora was still asleep upstairs, her small body curled around a stuffed dog that Trish Nakamura had brought the day before. Trish had driven 2 hours from Portland with her daughter Hannah, a bag of Nora's favorite books, and a casserole I couldn't eat. She sat with me for 3 hours without saying a single useless thing. That's the mark of a real friend, knowing when silence is more generous than words. "Mr. Grady, I need you to come to the precinct this afternoon," Vasquez said. "We have lab results and financials. You'll want to see both. I arrived at 2 o'clock. The Seattle Police Department's Major Crimes Unit occupied the 4th floor of a concrete building downtown that smelled like recycled air and burnt coffee. Vasquez met me at the elevator. She looked like she hadn't slept dark circles. Hair pulled into a tight ponytail. A pen tucked behind her left ear. She led me to a conference room where a whiteboard covered one entire wall. Photographs, timelines, arrows drawn in red and blue marker, printed phone records pinned in rows. In the center, 2 photos. Claire's face, her employee badge photo from the accounting firm. Smiling. Professional. And beside it, a mugshot of a man I had never seen. Square jaw, shaved head, a scar running through his left eyebrow. Marcus Hale. Let me walk you through what we have, Vasquez said. She clicked a remote, and a projector lit up the opposite wall. First, the forensics. The luminol results from 4712 Birchwood Lane confirmed large quantities of blood in the living room, concentrated in a 4-foot radius near the fireplace. The cleaning had been thorough bleach, enzymatic cleaner, fresh carpet, shampoo, but luminol doesn't care about effort. It finds hemoglobin, the way smoke finds cracks in a ceiling. DNA extraction from the blood was successful. The sample matched Claire's medical records on file at her physician's office. My daughter had bled in her own living room, near the fireplace where she used to read bedtime stories to Nora. I pressed my hands flat on the table to keep them from shaking. Second, hair and fiber analysis. 3 strands of hair recovered from the living room carpet did not belong to Claire, Garrett, or Nora. They were short, dark, and coarse. The DNA profile was being run through CODIS, the national database. Vasquez expected a match within 72 hours, but she already had a strong suspicion. Marcus Hale was arrested for assault in Tacoma 4 years ago, she said. His DNA is in the system. If those hairs are his, we place him inside the house. Third, and this is where the fire metaphor broke open into something larger, the financial records. Vasquez introduced me to a forensic accountant named Victor Sloan, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who spoke in numbers the way poets speak in metaphors. He had been tracing Garrett's financial history for 72 hours, and what he found was a controlled demolition disguised as a normal life. Garrett Ashford earned $112,000 annually as a cryptocurrency investment advisor at a firm called Pacific Edge Capital. Respectable income. Nice title. But behind that title was a crater. Sloan pulled up a spreadsheet on the projector, 18 months of transactions from 3 separate accounts. Account 1, the joint checking account shared with Claire. Regular deposits, mortgage payments, utilities, groceries. Normal on the surface, but withdrawals showed a pattern every 2 weeks. Between $800 and $1,500 transferred to Account 2. Account 2 was a personal brokerage account Garrett had opened without Claire's knowledge at a different bank. Over 18 months, he had funneled $91,000 into it. Every cent went into high-risk cryptocurrency trades. The returns column read like a casualty report. Ethereum positions loss. Bitcoin leverage, trades loss. A speculative altcoin called NovaCoin, total loss. In 18 months, Garrett had turned $91,000 into $4,600. He was chasing losses, Sloan said. Classic gambler's pattern. Each loss made the next bet bigger and more desperate. But the brokerage account wasn't the deepest hole. Account 3 was a personal credit line. A signature loan from a private lender, not a bank. Garrett had borrowed $360,000 at 14% interest. The lender was a company called Ridgeline Financial Services, registered in Nevada. Sloan had already flagged it as a shell company. The ownership trail led through 2 LLCs before dead-ending at a P.O. Box in Reno. $360,000. 14%. Monthly payments that Garrett had stopped making 4 months ago. The total outstanding balance, with penalties, $451,000. Vasquez pulled up one more document. A life insurance policy on Claire Ashford. Issued 14 months ago. Beneficiary: Garrett Ashford. Payout: $750,000. He increased the policy 8 months ago, Vasquez said quietly. Original amount was $250,000. He called the insurance company and tripled it. Claire co-signed, but we believe he forged her signature. The handwriting analysis is pending. $750,000. Enough to cover the $451,000 debt, pay Marcus Hale for his services, and walk away clean. I stared at the whiteboard. The arrows and numbers formed a map not of streets and addresses, but of greed and calculation. My daughter wasn't killed in a moment of rage. She was killed on a spreadsheet, months before the actual act. Every number pointed to the same conclusion. Garrett Ashford had decided that Claire was worth more dead than alive. Sloan showed me one final detail. 6 weeks before Claire disappeared, Garrett had purchased a vehicle, a used Porsche Cayenne, for $87,000. Cash. No financing. The dealership in Bellevue had a copy of the cashier's check. Where does a man drowning in $450,000 of debt get $87,000 in cash? Vasquez asked. The question was rhetorical. She already had a theory. The money came from somewhere outside his known accounts. A payment. An advance. A transaction they hadn't yet traced. I thought about what Claire once told me about her work. Numbers don't lie, Dad. People lie. Numbers just wait for someone to read them correctly. Someone was reading them now. And every digit screamed the name of the man I had once watched dance with my daughter at her wedding. Vasquez walked me to the elevator. Before the doors closed, she said one more thing. Mr. Grady, the CODIS results come back Monday. If Marcus Hale's DNA matches those hairs, we arrest him within 24 hours. And when we arrest him, Garrett's wall starts to crack. The elevator doors shut. I stood alone in that metal box descending 4 floors, and I thought about fire. How it starts, small, a spark, a match, a single point of ignition. How it builds, how it feeds, and how, if you're patient enough, you can trace it all the way back to the hand that struck the match. Monday was 3 days away. I could wait. I had spent 31 years walking into burning buildings. I knew how to be patient with destruction. Monday came the way dawn arrives, after a house fire, slow, gray, and carrying the weight of everything you lost in the dark. I was sitting on the edge of Nora's hospital bed at 6:30 in the morning, watching her sleep, when my phone vibrated against the plastic chair. Vasquez. One word in the text message. Match. Marcus Hale's DNA was a perfect hit on all 3 hair strands recovered from the living room carpet at 4712 Birchwood Lane. CODIS confirmed it. The man Nora had drawn with her purple crayon, the figure standing behind the house, had been inside my daughter's home. He had stood in the same room where her blood soaked into the floorboards. Science doesn't guess. Science doesn't speculate. It measures. And what it measured placed a convicted felon at the scene of my daughter's murder. I called Vasquez back from the hospital stairwell, keeping my voice low so the nurses wouldn't hear. What happens now? Now we find him, she said. Hale dropped off the grid 8 months ago. Last known address was a rental in Tacoma. Landlord says he left, owing 3 months' rent. No active phone. No credit card activity since September. But people like Hale always leave a trail. They just don't leave it where they think they do. She told me to sit tight. She told me to focus on Nora. She told me the department had the resources and the jurisdiction and the training to handle this part. I thanked her and hung up. Then I stood in that cold stairwell for 5 minutes, gripping the metal railing until my knuckles turned white, because sitting tight is the hardest thing you can ask a man whose daughter is still missing. 3 days passed. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Each day I sat with Nora, read her stories, helped her eat meals that were getting larger. Scrambled eggs now. Pasta. Orange slices. She peeled herself with careful fingers. Her body was healing in the way children's bodies do, fast, resilient, almost defiant. But at night she woke screaming, reaching for someone who wasn't there, calling for her mother in a voice that split the dark, like a siren. Dr. Kim visited every afternoon. She said the nightmares were normal. She said recovery was not a straight line. She said Nora was showing remarkable strength. I nodded at all of it and believed none of it. Because strength is a word adults use to describe children who have no other choice. Friday afternoon, Vasquez called again. Mr. Grady, we found a connection. Garrett Ashford owns a property that wasn't listed under his name. A cabin near Mount Rainier rural area called Mineral, about 90 miles southeast of Seattle. The deed is registered to a trust called Ashford Family Holdings, which Garrett established 2 years ago. He never disclosed it during our initial interview. A hidden cabin. A trust created 2 years ago around the same time he tripled the insurance policy and began funneling money into crypto. Every new fact snapped into place like a joint fitting into a copper pipe. We're executing a search warrant tomorrow morning at dawn, Vasquez continued. I'll call you when we have something. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the vinyl recliner beside Nora's bed and stared at the ceiling tiles, counting them the way I used to count seconds between radio checks during a structure fire. 1 Mississippi. 2 Mississippi. 60 seconds is a long time when you're waiting for a floor to collapse. 12 hours is an eternity when you're waiting to learn where your daughter's body has been hidden. Saturday. 6:14 in the morning. My phone rang. Mr. Grady. Vasquez's voice was stripped of everything professional. What remained underneath was human, raw, and tired. We found her. The cabin sat at the end of a gravel road 3 miles off Highway 7, surrounded by Douglas fir trees so dense that the canopy blocked most of the morning light. It was a single-story structure. Cedar walls, green metal roof, a covered porch with 2 rocking chairs that no one had sat in for months. Pine needles carpeted the steps. A padlock secured the front door. The forensic team cut it. Inside, the cabin was sparse. A wood-burning stove, a plaid couch, a small kitchen with a propane burner, a bathroom with a composting toilet. In the single bedroom, a bare mattress on a metal frame. Nothing remarkable. Nothing incriminating. The cabin looked like 100 other weekend retreats scattered across the Cascades. But Vasquez's team wasn't looking at what was visible. They were reading the fire beneath the surface. A cadaver dog named Ringo, a Belgian Malinois with 7 years of service, alerted twice. Once at the bathroom floor. Once at a spot in the backyard, 32 feet from the rear door, near a patch of earth where the ground had been recently disturbed. The soil was darker than the surrounding area. The grass hadn't fully regrown. They dug. 16 inches down, they found a plastic tarp. Beneath the tarp, wrapped in a moving blanket secured with duct tape, they found my daughter, Claire Elizabeth Grady Ashford, 35 years old, mother, accountant, the girl who once asked me at the fire station if I ever got scared. The medical examiner conducted a preliminary assessment on site before transporting the remains to the King County morgue. Cause of death: asphyxiation by manual strangulation. Ligature marks on both wrists indicated she had been restrained. Bruising on her forearms and knuckles confirmed she had fought back. Under her fingernails, the examiner recovered biological material, skin cells, and blood that did not belong to Claire. DNA processing was expedited. By Sunday evening, the results confirmed what Nora's drawings had already told us. The biological material under Claire's fingernails belonged to Marcus Hale. He had restrained her. She had fought. She had clawed at his skin hard enough to take pieces of him with her. Even in the last moments of her life, my daughter had not surrendered. She had marked her killer the way fire marks everything it touches permanently, indelibly, in a language that cannot be erased. Vasquez called me Sunday night with the full confirmation. I was standing in the hospital parking garage because I didn't want Nora to see my face when I heard the details. Strangulation, I repeated. Yes, and the DNA under her nails gives us Marcus Hale for the murder itself. Combined with the hair evidence from the house and Nora's testimony, we have enough to issue an arrest warrant. It went out an hour ago. Every law enforcement agency on the West Coast has his photo. And Garrett? Garrett is the architect, Mr. Grady. Hale is the weapon. We need Hale in custody to build the conspiracy case against your son-in-law. When we catch Hale, we flip him. That's how these things work. I leaned against a concrete pillar and closed my eyes. Somewhere on the other side of these mountains, Marcus Hale was running. And somewhere in a house that smelled like bleach, Garrett Ashford was sleeping in a bed he didn't deserve, believing his money and his lies and his hidden cabin had buried the truth deep enough. But I knew something about buried things. In 31 years, I never once saw a fire stay underground. Sooner or later, it finds oxygen. Sooner or later, it breaks through. And when it does, it takes everything. Claire was smarter than all of them. Smarter than Garrett with his spreadsheets and shell companies. Smarter than Marcus Hale with his muscle and his midnight visits. Smarter than anyone gave her credit for. Because while they were planning her death, she was planning her testimony. I just didn't know it yet. Not until Tuesday afternoon, 9 days after I found Nora in that shed. When I sat in the hospital room, holding my old fire helmet in my hands, and felt something shift inside the lining. Let me go back. That morning, Trish Nakamura arrived at Seattle Children's with a second round of supplies, clean clothes for Nora, a lavender blanket from Claire's Portland apartment, and a cardboard box she had picked up from my house on the way. I had asked her to grab a few things. My reading glasses, a wool sweater, and the fire helmet that Nora had been clutching when I found her in the shed. The hospital staff had cleaned it and placed it in a plastic bag labeled with Nora's patient number. It had been sitting in a storage closet on the pediatric floor since the night she was admitted. When Trish handed me the bag, Nora's eyes lit up for the first time in days. "Grandpa's helmet," she said. I pulled it out and placed it on the bed beside her. The helmet was old, 26 years old to be exact. A Cairns 1010, with a leather front piece stamped with Engine Company 14, Portland Fire Bureau. The yellow paint was chipped. The face shield was scratched. The interior padding had been replaced twice during my career. And the chin strap had been restitched by hand after a ceiling collapse in 2009 nearly ripped it off my head. This helmet had gone into 412 structure fires with me. It had taken hits from falling beams, melting drywall, and exploding windows. I retired it the same day I retired. Myself hung it on a hook by my front door like a soldier hangs his dog tags. Claire had always loved it. When she was a girl, she used to put it on and march around the living room, pretending to rescue her stuffed animals from imaginary fires. And now, apparently, she had used it one final time. I turned the helmet over in my hands, running my fingers along the interior lining. The padding felt normal, dense foam, covered in moisture-wicking fabric. But near the crown, on the left side, something was different. A slight bump, a hard rectangle pressing against the foam where no rectangle should be. I looked at Nora. "Sweetheart, did Mommy put something inside Grandpa's helmet?" Nora nodded. "Mommy said it was a secret. She said only you would know where to look, because you know the helmet better than anyone." My throat closed. I reached into the lining and found a small slit cut carefully with a razor blade or craft knife, just wide enough for 2 fingers. I slid my hand inside and pulled out a USB flash drive wrapped in a single layer of electrical tape. Black tape, the kind electricians use. The kind Claire knew I kept in every drawer of my house. I held it in my palm. It weighed almost nothing. A small black rectangle, maybe 2 inches long, wrapped in tape with 2 words written on the outside in Claire's handwriting, blue ink. Small capital letters. "For Dad." Trish watched from the doorway. "What is that?" I said slowly. "It's my daughter's voice. I didn't open it at the hospital. I called Vasquez first." She arrived within 40 minutes with Victor Sloan and a department-issued laptop with forensic imaging software. They photographed the helmet, the slit in the lining, and the USB drive in situ before inserting it into the laptop through a write blocker, a device that prevents any data from being altered during examination. The drive contained 4 files. File 1 was a spreadsheet. Claire had built it herself. Rows and columns, tracking every suspicious transaction she had discovered in Garrett's financial history. She had labeled each entry with dates, amounts, source accounts, and destination accounts. The crypto losses were there documented with screenshots from the brokerage platform. The transfers to Ridgeline Financial Services were highlighted in red. A column on the far right contained Claire's notes in short, precise sentences. G transferred $4,200 to Ridgeline, 3/15, no corresponding invoice or service. G opened personal credit line, 7/22. I was not informed. Ridgeline Financial Nevada Shell Corp. No physical office. No employees listed. She had been auditing her own husband for months. File 2 was a PDF scanned copies of documents Claire had secretly photographed. Bank statements Garrett had hidden. The signature page of the life insurance increase, and beside it, a photograph of Claire's actual signature from their mortgage application. Even to my untrained eye, the 2 signatures didn't match. The insurance signature was shakier, the loops too wide, the pressure inconsistent. Claire had known it was forged. File 3 was a 37-second video. Claire's face, filmed on her phone, close up. She was sitting in what looked like her car. I recognized the gray fabric of her Honda Civic's headrest. Her eyes were red. Her voice was steady but thin, like a wire pulled taut. Dad, if you're seeing this, something happened to me. I found things: financial records, loans, a fake insurance signature. Garrett owes almost $500,000 to people I can't identify. I confronted him last week, and he denied everything. But I saw his face. He was scared. Not guilty. Scared. Like a man who's already set something in motion and can't stop it. I don't know what he's planning, but I copied everything onto this drive. I'm putting it inside your helmet, because it's the one place he'd never think to look. Take care of Nora. She's the only thing that matters. I love you, Dad. 37 seconds. That's all she had. 37 seconds to record her fear, her evidence, and her love, and hide it inside the one object that represented safety to her since she was 6 years old. Vasquez paused the video. The room was silent. Sloan had removed his glasses and was pressing his fingers against his closed eyes. Trish had stepped into the hallway. I could hear her crying through the door. I didn't cry. Not then. Firefighters learn to hold the collapse inside until the building is clear. The building wasn't clear yet. File 4 was a single photograph, a selfie Claire had taken of herself holding a handwritten note. The note read, I, Claire Grady, Ashford, created this drive on March 28th. In sound mind. Contents document financial fraud and forgery by my husband Garrett Ashford. If I am harmed, he is responsible. Date stamped by the phone's metadata. March 28th, 40. 3 days before she disappeared. Vasquez looked at me across the table. Mr. Grady, your daughter just handed us the case. I looked at the helmet sitting on the hospital bed beside my granddaughter. Yellow paint chipped from 412 fires. Leather front piece scarred and faded, and inside its lining, hidden in the one place only a firefighter's daughter would think to hide it, the evidence that would burn Garrett Ashford's lies to the ground. Claire was smarter than all of them. And even from beyond the silence, she was still fighting. They say a fire can only run as far as its fuel allows. Cut the oxygen, remove the combustible material, and even the most violent blaze will choke and die on its own heat. Garrett Ashford had been running on borrowed fuel for months, borrowed money, borrowed time, borrowed lies. And on Thursday morning, 16 days after I found Nora in that shed, his fuel ran out. It started with Marcus Hale. Vasquez had told me the arrest warrant went out across the entire West Coast. Every police department, every sheriff's office, every border checkpoint from Seattle to San Diego had Marcus Hale's photographed square jaw, shaved head, scar through the left eyebrow. But Hale wasn't stupid. He had survived 8 months off the grid before Claire's murder, and he clearly planned to disappear again. What he didn't plan for was his own appetite. On Wednesday evening, a gas station attendant in Medford, Oregon, a small city near the California border, recognized Hale's face from a bulletin pinned to the employee break room wall. Hale had walked in to buy cigarettes, a prepaid phone, and 2 microwave burritos. He paid cash. He wore a baseball cap pulled low and a flannel jacket. But the scar gave him away. You can change your clothes, grow a beard, dye your hair. You can't erase a scar. The attendant called the Medford police. A patrol unit located Hale's vehicle, a stolen 2014 Honda Accord with Washington plates, parked at a motel called the Timber Lodge, room 14. At 11:47 that night, Medford PD and 2 U.S. Marshals breached the room. Hale was lying on the bed watching television with a half-eaten burrito on the nightstand and a loaded 9mm handgun under the pillow. He didn't reach for it. He didn't run. According to Vasquez, he looked at the officers, set down the remote control, and said 5 words. "Took you long enough, huh?" They transported him to the Jackson County Jail overnight. By Thursday morning, he was in a Seattle PD interrogation room, seated across from Detective Vasquez and a prosecutor from the King County District Attorney's Office. Assistant District Attorney Diane Marchetti. "Vasquez called me at noon. He's talking, Mr. Grady." Those 3 words carried more weight than any sentence I had heard in 2 weeks. Hale was talking. Not through a lawyer, not through negotiated silence, not through the careful legal dance that guilty men perform when the evidence is stacked against them. Marcus Hale was talking because Marcus Hale understood mathematics. His DNA was in the house. His DNA was under Claire's fingernails. And a 7-year-old girl had drawn his face in purple crayon. The equation had only one solution, but Hale wasn't talking for free. He had a condition. ADA Marchetti explained it to me that afternoon in a phone call that lasted 42 minutes. Hale would provide a full confession, details of the murder, the planning, the burial, the payments in exchange for a reduced charge. First-degree murder would drop to second degree. The conspiracy charge would remain. Hale's attorney argued that his client was a hired instrument, not the architect. The architect was Garrett Ashford. I gripped the phone so hard the case creaked. "Second degree," I repeated. "He strangled my daughter with his hands. And you're offering him second degree." Marchetti's voice was calm and practiced. She had done this before. "Mr. Grady, I understand your anger. I share it. But Hale's testimony is the bridge between the physical evidence and Garrett Ashford. Without it, we can prove Hale killed Claire. With it, we can prove Garrett ordered the killing, planned it, paid for it, and intended to profit from it. First-degree murder, with special circumstances. Conspiracy. Insurance fraud. Child endangerment. Garrett Ashford will never see daylight again." She paused. "Marcus Hale is a weapon. Your son-in-law is the hand that aimed it. I want the hand." I closed my eyes. 31 years in the fire service taught me about triage. You don't save every room. You save the structure. You sacrifice the hallway to protect the stairwell. You lose the attic to keep the foundation standing. It wasn't fair. It was never fair. But it was how you won. "What does second degree mean for him?" I asked. 25 to 30 years. Eligible for parole after 20. Given his prior record and the nature of the crime, the parole board will not be sympathetic. 20 years minimum for the man who choked the life out of my daughter. It tasted like ash in my mouth. But if it meant Garrett, the man who financed, planned, and orchestrated everything, would spend the rest of his natural life behind bars, I could swallow it. "Do what you need to do," I said. Hale's confession took 6 hours. Vasquez told me later that he spoke in a flat, monotone voice, like a man reading instructions from a manual. No emotion, no remorse, just facts, delivered with the mechanical precision of someone who had disconnected from the humanity of what he had done. He confirmed everything. Garrett had approached him through a mutual contact 7 months before Claire's death. The arrangement was simple: $120,000 for the job, half up front, half after the insurance payout. The $60,000 advance came in 3 cash installments, delivered in envelopes at the Birchwood Lane house during late-night meetings. Nora had seen those meetings. Nora had drawn those envelopes. Hale described the night of the murder in clinical terms. He entered through the back door, using a key Garrett had left under the mat. Claire was in the living room. Garrett was upstairs with Nora, keeping her in the bedroom. Claire heard a noise, came to investigate. Hale grabbed her in the hallway. She fought. She scratched his face and arms. He overpowered her. It took, he said, approximately 4 minutes. 4 minutes. My daughter fought for 4 minutes against a man who outweighed her by 80 pounds. She fought until her body couldn't fight anymore. And in those 4 minutes, she collected enough of his DNA under her fingernails to put him in that interrogation room 16 days later. After Claire was dead, Garrett came downstairs. Together, they wrapped the body, loaded it into Garrett's SUV, and drove to the cabin near Mount Rainier. They buried her before sunrise. Then Garrett returned home, cleaned the house with bleach, and told Nora that Mommy had gone on a trip. But Claire had already prepared for this. She had already hidden the USB drive. She had already recorded her 37-second testimony. She had already written her note. The fire she started was still burning. And Garrett didn't even know it existed. Thursday evening, 6:18 p.m. Garrett Ashford was arrested at his office at Pacific Edge Capital in downtown Seattle. Vasquez told me he was sitting at his desk reviewing client portfolios when 2 detectives and a uniformed officer entered. They read him his rights. He said nothing. He stood, buttoned his suit jacket, and walked out between the officers with the same composure he had worn at Claire's wedding, polished, controlled, and absolutely hollow. He was charged with first-degree murder with special circumstances, conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and felony child endangerment. Bail was denied. I have stood at the threshold of buildings fully engulfed in flame walls, glowing orange, ceilings buckling, heat so intense it warped the air like a funhouse mirror. Every time, there was a moment before entry. A single breath. A decision. You either go in or you don't. There is no middle ground when a structure is burning. The King County Superior Courthouse felt exactly like that on the morning of October 14th. The trial had taken 4 months to reach this day. 4 months of depositions, motions, jury selection, legal arguments I barely understood, and phone calls from ADA Marchetti that arrived with the regularity of shift changes. During those months, Nora was discharged from Seattle Children's, and I brought her home to Portland. She started 2nd grade at Willow Creek Elementary, 3 weeks late. She slept in Claire's old bedroom, the one I had kept unchanged since Claire left for college. Purple walls, a bookshelf full of Nancy Drew mysteries, a window that faced the backyard, where I taught Claire to throw a softball when she was 9. Nora saw Dr. Kim twice a week via video call. The nightmares decreased from every night to 3 times a week to once. She still wouldn't sleep without a light on, and she still flinched at sudden sounds. But she was learning to laugh again. Small laughs, cautious, like a bird testing a branch before committing its full weight. Progress isn't a straight line. Dr. Kim was right about that. Trish helped. She drove from her house every Tuesday and Thursday to watch Nora while I handled legal meetings, evidence, reviews, and the endless paperwork that trails behind a murder case like smoke after a fire. Trish never complained. She brought meals, helped with homework, took Nora to the park with Hannah. She became the scaffolding that held our small, broken family upright while the structure was still being rebuilt. Now the trial. The courtroom was room 4E, a large, wood-paneled chamber on the 4th floor with high windows that let in pale October light. Judge Robert Whitaker presided, a 62-year-old man with silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a voice that commanded silence without raising itself. I had been told by Marchetti that Whitaker was fair, meticulous, and intolerant of theatrics. Good. I sat in the second row behind the prosecution table. Trish sat beside me on my left. On my right was an empty seat I had reserved for Claire. No one questioned it. A few people in the gallery glanced at the seat and understood. The jury was 12 people. 7 women, 5 men, ages ranging from late 20s to early 70s. A teacher, a retired postal worker, a nurse, a mechanic, an IT manager. Ordinary people asked to weigh extraordinary evidence and decide whether a man should spend the rest of his life in a cage. I looked at their faces and saw what I always saw in the faces of civilians at a fire scene: fear disguised as composure. Garrett sat at the defense table in a navy suit, white shirt, no tie. His attorney was Gerald Kinsey, a tall, lean man in his 50s with a reputation for defending high-profile clients in the Pacific Northwest. Kinsey had filed 14 pre-trial motions, including attempts to suppress the USB evidence, exclude Nora's testimony as unreliable, and challenge the chain of custody on the DNA samples. Judge Whitaker denied 12 of them. 2 were partially granted minor procedural adjustments that Marchetti said would not affect the prosecution's core strategy. I looked at Garrett across the courtroom. He sat with his hands folded on the table, his posture straight, his expression neutral. He did not look at me. He had not looked at me once since his arrest. The last time I had seen his face was in Claire's wedding photos, smiling too wide, holding my daughter's hand, already calculating her value in dollars. Ada Marchetti stood first. She was a woman of medium height, dark hair cut at the shoulders, with a voice that carried without shouting, the kind of voice that made you lean forward to listen rather than lean back to endure. She addressed the jury without notes. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about arithmetic. Cold, deliberate arithmetic. The defendant, Garrett Ashford, accumulated $451,000 in debt through reckless cryptocurrency speculation and predatory private lending. He then tripled his wife's life insurance policy to $750,000, forging her signature to do it. He hired a man named Marcus Hale for $120,000 to murder Claire Ashford in her own living room. And after his wife was strangled to death while their 7-year-old daughter hid in a closet, he buried her body in a shallow grave near Mount Rainier and told the world she had gone on a trip. She paused. The courtroom was silent. Over the next 4 days, you will hear from forensic scientists who matched Marcus Hale's DNA to the crime scene and to the biological material found under Claire's fingernails. You will hear from a forensic accountant who traced every dollar of the defendant's debt and every payment to his hired killer. You will see a USB drive that Claire Ashford hid inside her father's fire helmet containing a spreadsheet, forged signature evidence, and a video recorded 43 days before her death in which she names her husband as a threat to her life. Another pause. She turned slightly toward the jury's left side, where the nurse and the retired postal worker sat. And you will hear from Nora Ashford, 7 years old, who drew pictures of the man who killed her mother, who wrote 3 words on a piece of paper with a purple crayon. Mommy said hide. 3 words that broke this case open. Marchetti let the silence hold for 3 full seconds. Then she said, Claire Ashford cannot speak for herself, but she left her voice behind. In every piece of evidence, you will see. Listen to her. She sat down. The courtroom exhaled. Kinsey's opening was different. He stood slowly, buttoned his jacket, and addressed the jury with the practiced warmth of a man who had spent decades selling reasonable doubt. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a tragedy. No one disputes that Claire Ashford is dead. No one disputes that Marcus Hale killed her. But the question before you is not whether a murder occurred, it is whether my client ordered it. The prosecution will present financial records, circumstantial connections, and the testimony of the confessed killer himself, a man who negotiated a reduced sentence in exchange for pointing his finger at someone else. He let that land. Marcus Hale is not a witness. He is a participant saving himself. And a 7-year-old child's crayon drawings, however heartbreaking, are not forensic evidence. I ask you to look past the emotion and examine the facts with the rigor this court demands. He sat down. The courtroom shifted. I could feel the jury processing both arguments, weighing them against each other like hands on a scale. Judge Whitaker called a 15-minute recess. I stood and walked to the hallway. Trish followed. She handed me a bottle of water I didn't open. "How are you doing?" she asked. I leaned against the marble wall and stared at the ceiling. How was I doing? My daughter was dead. Her killer had already confessed. The man who paid for her death was sitting 40 feet away in a navy suit, and 12 strangers were about to decide whether justice would arrive or collapse at the threshold. "I'm standing," I said. "That's enough for now." The recess ended. The first witness was called, and the fire I'd been carrying inside my chest for 4 months finally had a place to burn. Day 2 of the trial. Wednesday, October 15th. The courtroom smelled like old wood, recycled air, and the quiet desperation of people trying to sit still while the worst moments of someone's life were read aloud like a grocery list. ADA Marchetti called her first major witness at 9:22. Marcus Hale entered through a side door, escorted by 2 U.S. Marshals. Orange jumpsuit. Wrists cuffed. The scar through his left eyebrow caught the overhead light as he sat in the witness chair. The jury shifted. Hearing about a killer and sitting 12 feet from one are 2 entirely separate experiences. The retired postal worker folded her arms. The mechanic leaned forward. The nurse looked at her hands. Marchetti approached without rushing. She let silence build until the courtroom felt like a room filling with smoke. "Mr. Hale, please describe how you first came into contact with the defendant." Hale's voice was flat, stripped of everything human. "He contacted me through a guy named Dean Phelps from Tacoma. Phelps said someone needed a problem handled. I met Garrett at a bar in Bellevue about 7 months before it happened. He bought me a beer and said his wife was a problem. He needed her gone. What did you understand gone to mean?" "Dead. No ambiguity." Marchetti walked him through the timeline. 3 planning meetings at Birchwood Lane, always after Nora was in bed. Cash payments, $20,000 each, 3 envelopes. A key under the back door mat. The signal. Garrett would text one word. Confirmed. When Claire was downstairs, and Nora secured upstairs. On the night of the murder, did you receive that text? Yes. 11:14 p.m. What happened after you entered the house? Hale paused. He stared at the table. She heard me. Came out of the living room. She saw me. And she knew. She didn't scream. She said one word. Nora. Then she ran for the stairs. My hands gripped the bench. Claire's last word was her daughter's name. Not help. Not please. Nora. She didn't make it, Hale continued. I caught her in the hallway. She fought. Scratched my face, my arms. Stronger than I expected. About 4 minutes. Marchetti asked the question I had been dreading. Where was Garrett Ashford during those 4 minutes? Upstairs. In the bedroom with his daughter. He came down after I was done. After I was done. Spoken like a man describing the end of a shift. Trish's hand closed around my forearm. I needed the anchor. Kinsey's cross-examination lasted 90 minutes. He attacked from every angle. The plea deal. Hale's criminal history. The gap between his initial silence and his detailed confession. Mr. Hale. You're testifying because the prosecution reduced your charge from first-degree to second-degree murder. You have a personal incentive to say exactly what they want to hear. I'm telling the truth. You're telling a version that benefits you. That's not the same thing. Kinsey landed points. 2 jurors exchanged a glance. Doubt is a seed that doesn't need much water. But Marchetti's redirect was surgical. Mr. Hale, The prosecution's case does not rest on your testimony alone, does it? No. There is DNA placing you at the scene. DNA from under Claire's fingernails. Financial records. Documenting payments. And a USB drive hidden by Claire herself, containing a video naming the defendant as a threat. She turned to the jury. The witness's credibility is one thread in a rope, ladies and gentlemen. Not the rope itself. After recess, Marchetti introduced her second witness, but this witness would not sit in the chair. Nora's testimony was pre-recorded. A 43-minute video taken at Seattle Children's Hospital, with Dr. Kim present, a child advocacy specialist, and a court-approved forensic interviewer. Judge Whitaker had granted the accommodation to prevent re-traumatization. Nora appeared on the courtroom screen in a purple sweater, hair in a ponytail. A stuffed dog pressed against her chest. Her voice was quiet but clear. She described the nights Mark came to the house. Whispered conversations. Envelopes. She described the last night Daddy telling her to stay in the bedroom. Sounds downstairs. Mommy's voice saying her name once. Then nothing. She described being put in the closet the next morning. Daddy said Mommy went on a trip. Stay quiet. She described the dark. The hunger. The scratching on the door because she wanted out but was afraid to make noise. The forensic interviewer asked, Nora, did your mommy ever tell you to do something special if you were scared? Nora nodded. Mommy said go to the shed and hold Grandpa's helmet. She said Grandpa would come. She said Grandpa always comes. I broke. Not loudly. I bent forward and pressed my forehead against the bench in front of me and let 31 years of training dissolve into silence. Trish's hand stayed on my arm. She didn't say a word. When I lifted my head, the jury had changed. The retired postal worker was wiping her eyes. The mechanic stared straight ahead, jaw locked. The nurse had her hand over her heart. Even Kinsey sat motionless. There was no cross-examination that could dismantle a child's truth delivered in a purple sweater with a stuffed dog against her chest. Marchetti's final exhibit was the USB drive. Victor Sloan testified to its contents spreadsheet. Forged signature, metadata. Then Marchetti played Claire's 37-second video. Claire's face filled the screen. Red eyes. Steady voice. Thin as wire. Dad, if you're seeing this, something happened to me. The room stopped breathing. 12 jurors watched a dead woman speak. A woman who had audited her own husband, documented his fraud, recorded her warning, and hidden it inside a firefighter's helmet because she trusted her father more than any system or institution. When the video ended, Marchetti stood in silence for 5 seconds. The prosecution rests for today, Your Honor. I walked out into the October air. Seattle sky dry, gray, cold. I stood on the courthouse steps and breathed. Claire's voice was still in my ears. Nora's voice was still in my chest. And somewhere inside that building, Garrett Ashford was being led back to his cell, having watched his dead wife testify against him from beyond the grave. The fire had reached him, and he had nowhere left to run. In the fire service, we had a term, flashover. It's the moment when every combustible surface in a room reaches ignition temperature simultaneously and the entire space erupts into flame. No warning, no gradual transition. Flashover is total, instantaneous, and irreversible. Day 3. Thursday, October 16th. The defense's turn. Gerald Kinsey had one strategy left: put Garrett on the stand. Defense attorneys rarely let their clients testify because cross-examination is a controlled fire, and most defendants don't survive inside one. But Kinsey was out of options. The DNA was undeniable. The financial records were documented. The USB drive had turned Claire into a witness who could not be discredited or silenced. All Kinsey had left was Garrett's voice and the thin hope that composure could outweigh evidence. Garrett took the stand at 9:45. Hands flat on the rail. Posture straight. Expression calm. The same manufactured calm I had seen at Claire's wedding, at family dinners, at every moment when a real man would have shown something genuine. Kinsey guided him through his version. Garrett admitted the debt, the crypto losses, the predatory loan from Ridgeline Financial. But he denied everything else. I did not hire Marcus Hale. I did not plan my wife's death. I did not forge her signature. Hale was a man I met once, briefly, through an acquaintance. He became obsessed with our family. He stalked Claire. When she disappeared, I didn't call the police because I was ashamed. Ashamed of my debts. Ashamed I couldn't protect my family. He paused. His voice cracked, perfectly timed. I loved my wife. I loved my daughter. I've spent every day since Claire's death wishing I had done more. A performance. Masterful. Polished. For a fraction of a second, two jurors softened the IT manager and the young woman in the back row. Doubt flickered like a candle in a draft. Then Marchetti stood. She picked up a single sheet of paper and approached the witness stand the way I used to approach a fire that looked contained but wasn't, slowly, reading the heat, watching for the moment the structure would fail. Mr. Ashford, you said you met Marcus Hale once, correct? Yes, once. She turned to the jury. Then back. Your phone records show 17 calls between your cell phone and a prepaid number purchased by Marcus Hale at a Tacoma convenience store. 17 calls over 4 months. The longest was 42 minutes. She placed the records on the overhead projector. 17 lines highlighted in yellow. Garrett's composure flickered a micro-expression, there and gone, like a crack in a load-bearing wall. I don't recall those calls. You don't recall 17 calls to the man who murdered your wife. The number isn't familiar. Someone else may have used my phone. Marchetti moved forward without arguing. Mr. Ashford, the prosecution's handwriting expert, Dr. Patricia Yuen, testified that the insurance signature is inconsistent with Claire's known handwriting in 14 measurable characteristics. Slant, pressure, spacing, loop formation. She projected Claire's mortgage signature beside the insurance signature. Even from the second row, the difference was visible. The mortgage signature was fluid, confident. The insurance signature was hesitant, loops too wide, pressure uneven. Do you maintain Claire signed this document? 3 seconds of silence. In a courtroom, an eternity, Claire signed many documents. I can't speak to the specific conditions, but the insurance agent's records show you were present when she signed. I may have been present. I don't specifically recall. You don't recall being present when your wife tripled her own life insurance policy. Kinsey stood. Objection. Badgering the witness. Overruled, Whitaker said. Garrett swallowed. I don't recall the specific details. Marchetti let the answer hang like smoke before a flashover. Let's talk about the Porsche. 6 weeks before your wife's disappearance, you purchased a Porsche Cayenne for $87,000 cash. A cashier's check from Columbia Pacific Bank, an account opened 4 months prior, with a single deposit of $92,000 wired from Ridgeline Financial Services. She projected the bank statement. One deposit. $92,000. From the same shell company that held Garrett's loan. Why would your lender, the company you owed $451,000, wire you $92,000? Garrett's left thumb pressed against his right palm, a small, involuntary movement I recognized. The way a firefighter recognizes a beam beginning to crack. It was a restructured payment. Part of a loan renegotiation. Mr. Sloan found no documentation of any restructuring. No amended contract. No correspondence. No email. Just $92,000 appearing, and immediately spent on a luxury vehicle while your wife's salary paid for groceries. She turned to the jury. This wasn't a restructured payment. This was an advance, a down payment on the murder of Claire Ashford and the collection of a $750,000 insurance payout. Kinsey objected. Sustained editorializing. But the damage was done. The numbers were on the screen, and Garrett's mask was cracking. Marchetti asked one final question. Mr. Ashford, Your wife recorded a video 43 days before her death. She said, quote, I saw his face. He was scared. Not guilty. Scared. Like a man who's already set something in motion and can't stop it. Did you set something in motion? Garrett opened his mouth. No sound. He closed it. Looked at Kinsey. Kinsey's face was stone. I did not. Garrett finally said. But the flashover had already happened. Every surface in the room was burning. The jury saw it. Marchetti saw it. And Garrett, hands trembling against the rail, saw it too. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Whitaker called recess before closing arguments. I walked into the hallway. Trish handed me water. It's almost over, she said. I looked back through the courtroom door. Garrett was still in the witness chair, staring at the projected image, his wife's real signature beside his forgery. 2 signatures on a screen. One authentic, one counterfeit. The distance between them was the distance between a living woman and a shallow grave near Mount Rainier. Tomorrow, closing arguments, the jury, the verdict. The fire was almost out. But it hadn't finished burning yet. Friday, October 17th. Day 4. The last day. I woke at 4 in the morning in the hotel room Trish had booked 3 blocks from the courthouse. 2 hours of sleep. The room was dark, except for amber streetlight bleeding through the curtains. I lay there thinking about a conversation with Claire when she was 12. She had come home furious because a classmate cheated on a math test and scored higher. She sat at the kitchen table with her arms crossed and said, "It's not fair, Dad. She cheated, and nobody cares." I said, "The numbers don't change just because someone lies about them. The truth is patient. It waits." She looked at me with those sharp brown eyes. But what if it waits too long? I didn't have an answer then. I had one now. The truth had waited 43 days inside a fire helmet. 16 days inside a 7-year-old's memory. 4 months through depositions and motions. Today, it would stop waiting. The courtroom was full by 8:30. Every gallery seat taken. Media in the back rows, reporters, a sketch artist, Trish beside me. The empty seat on my right. Claire's seat. Closing arguments began at 9. Marchetti stood before the jury. Without notes. 4 days ago, I told you this case was about arithmetic. I want to revise that. This case is about choices. She raised one finger. He chose to gamble $91,000 on cryptocurrency and lose it. Second, he chose to borrow $360,000 from a shell company at 14%. Third, he chose to triple his wife's insurance to $750,000 and forge her signature. Fourth, he chose 17 phone calls over 4 months to plan the murder with Marcus Hale. Fifth, he chose to text confirmed at 11:14 p.m. the night Claire was strangled. Sixth, he chose to bury her near Mount Rainier. Seventh, he chose to lock his 7-year-old daughter in a closet and say Mommy went on a trip. She lowered her hand. Claire also made choices. She investigated her husband's finances. She documented every transaction. She photographed the forged signature. She recorded a 37-second video naming him as a threat. She hid it inside her father's fire helmet, and in her final moments, she told her daughter to hide. Silence. Only the ventilation hum. Garrett's choices were driven by greed. Claire's were driven by love. You've seen both. Now, make yours. She sat down. Kinsey rose slowly. His closing was measured and built on reasonable doubt. He reminded the jury that Hale was a confessed killer whose testimony was purchased with a reduced sentence. Financial mismanagement wasn't murder. Phone records could have unexplored explanations. Nora's drawings were emotionally powerful, but forensically meaningless. Sympathy is not evidence, he said. Grief is not proof. The prosecution asked you to feel. I'm asking you to think. Competent. Logical. But this courtroom had heard a child say, "Grandpa always comes," and watched a dead woman speak from a screen. Logic had a hill that reason alone could not summit. Judge Whitaker delivered jury instructions at 11:15. 4 charges. First-degree murder, with special circumstances. Conspiracy to commit murder. Insurance fraud. Felony child endangerment. Beyond a reasonable doubt, unanimous agreement on each count. The jury retired at 11:42. I sat in the hallway on a wooden bench. Trish brought vending machine coffee. Worse than the hospital cafeteria. I drank it anyway. Time moved the way it moves during overhaul, tearing open walls after a fire, searching for hidden embers. Slow, every minute stretched. 1 hour. 2. 3. Trish went to check on Nora at the family services office 2 blocks away with Dr. Kim. I sat alone. A reporter asked for a comment. I shook my head. A janitor mopped the floor near the restrooms, the loneliest sound I had ever heard. 4:27 p.m. 4 hours and 45 minutes. The bailiff opened the door. The jury has reached a verdict. I walked back into room 4E, the way I walked into burning buildings forward, because there was no other direction. Trish appeared beside me, flushed from running. She grabbed my hand. The jury filed in. I watched their faces. The postal worker's eyes were red. The mechanic stared ahead. The nurse held a folded tissue. None of them looked at Garrett. In 31 years, every firefighter said the same thing: when the news is bad for someone, people avoid their eyes. Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict on all counts? The foreperson, the teacher, auburn hair, 40s, stood. We have. Your Honor. The defendant will rise. Garrett stood. Kinsey beside him. The courtroom held its breath. On the charge of murder in the first degree with special circumstances, guilty. The word landed like a beam through a burned floor. Solid. Final. Conspiracy to commit murder? Guilty. Insurance fraud? Guilty. Felony child endangerment? Guilty. 4 counts. 4 nails in a coffin built from spreadsheets, DNA, crayon drawings, and a video hidden inside a firefighter's helmet. Garrett stood motionless, hands at his sides, staring at the table. Already somewhere else behind a wall he couldn't climb, inside a room with no exit. Whitaker scheduled sentencing for December 5th. Thanked the jury. Adjourned. The gavel came down once clean, final, echoing through wood panels and settling into silence like the last ember dying in rain. Marchetti shook my hand. No triumph. Just a firm nod. One professional to another, after a difficult job. I walked outside into October afternoon. The sky was breaking open. Clouds pulling apart. Pale blue light spilling through for the first time in days. I called the family services office. Dr. Kim answered. Mr. Grady? Put Nora on. Rustling. Then her voice small, careful, carrying the weight of everything and the hope of everything at once. Grandpa, it's over, sweetheart. The jury said guilty. All of it. It's over. Silence. Then Nora said something that broke me open for the last time. Mommy helped, didn't she? I closed my eyes. October air filled my lungs. Somewhere above the clouds, blue light was spreading. Yeah, baby. Mommy helped. December 5th. Sentencing day. The courtroom was quieter than during the trial. Fewer reporters. Fewer spectators. The urgency had drained like water from a hose after the pump shuts off. What remained was formality. The system placing the last brick in a wall that would hold for the rest of Garrett Ashford's life. Garrett was brought in through the side door. Orange jumpsuit. Wrists cuffed. He had lost weight. His cheeks were hollow, eyes flat and distant, a man already living inside the cage before the door officially closed. Marchetti was brief. She recounted the charges, the evidence, the unanimous verdict. She recommended maximum sentences, served consecutively. She mentioned Claire once by name, and Nora once by name. Then she sat down. The evidence had been her argument. Today was arithmetic. Kinsey requested leniency, no prior record. Education, professional standing, concurrent sentencing. Whitaker listened without expression. Then the judge turned to me. Mr. Grady, you have the right to deliver a victim impact statement. I stood. No notes. No prepared speech. Just what was left after 6 months of grief and sleepless nights. I'm a firefighter. Retired. 31 years. Engine Company 14, Portland. In 31 years, I pulled 63 people out of burning buildings. I remember every face, every name, every sound they made when they realized they would survive. I paused. I couldn't pull my daughter out. I was 3 hours away, and I didn't know the building was on fire. But she left something behind. Evidence. A video. A note. And her daughter alive, hiding in a shed, clutching my helmet, because Claire told her Grandpa would come. And I did. I faced the judge. I'm not here for vengeance. Vengeance burns the person holding the match. I'm here for safety. My granddaughter is 7. She wakes screaming for her mother. She flinches when doors close too loud. She draws closets in dark rooms. She's healing from the foundation up, one beam at a time. But she'll carry these scars forever. I don't need him to apologize. I need him to never hurt anyone again. I sat down. Trish squeezed my hand. Whitaker took 12 minutes. He reviewed each count. Cited aggravating factors, premeditation, financial motive, involvement of a minor, contract killer, and delivered his sentence. First-degree murder, with special circumstances. Life without parole. Conspiracy to commit murder. 25 years, consecutive. Insurance fraud. 10 years, consecutive. Felony child endangerment. 5 years, consecutive. Life without parole plus 40 years. Garrett stood motionless. No reaction. No collapse. He simply stood the way. A building stands after fire has consumed everything inside. Upright. Hollow. Already gone. The deputies led him through the side door. It closed with a sound like a seal engaging on a fireproof compartment. Final. Airtight. Done. Marcus Hale had been sentenced in November, 28 years, parole eligible after 22. I didn't attend. He wasn't worth the drive. 6 months later. Portland in June smells like cut grass, warm asphalt, and the jasmine along my back fence. I wake at 5:30 shift change body clock, that 31 years built and retirement couldn't break. Coffee on the porch, light coming up over the Douglas firs. Birds arguing about territory the way they've argued every morning, since before humans learned to start fires. Nora sleeps until 7. She has her own room now. Not Claire's old room, a new one. We painted it together on a Saturday in April. She chose the color. Purple, magic, and bravery. She goes to school. She has friends, a girl named Sadie who likes dinosaurs and a boy named Marcus, which twisted my stomach the first time I heard it. But children don't carry the weight of coincidence the way adults do. She brings home drawings, not closets anymore. Not dark rooms or faceless men. Houses with open doors. Dogs in yards. Sunlight in big yellow circles above triangle roofs. Dr. Kim meets with her weekly by video. Nightmares come less often, once a week, sometimes less. She sleeps with the light on. She still flinches at sudden sounds. But last Tuesday she laughed so hard at dinner that milk came out of her nose, and for 3 seconds the kitchen sounded exactly the way a kitchen is supposed to sound: loud, messy, alive. Trish comes every Sunday with Hannah. The 4 of us eat whatever I've managed not to burn. My cooking has improved from dangerous to merely questionable, which Trish calls the most progress she's witnessed from a man who once set fire to a grilled cheese. I accept the criticism. I visit Claire's grave the first Saturday of every month. Riverview Cemetery, under a Douglas fir. The headstone reads, Claire Elizabeth Grady, Ashford, beloved daughter, devoted mother. The numbers never lied. That last line was mine. The funeral director raised an eyebrow. I didn't explain. The fire helmet hangs by my front door, same hook, same spot. The lining has been repaired, where Claire cut the slit. The USB is in evidence storage at King County Courthouse for the duration of appeals. But the helmet is home. 412 fires, and one final act of love. It earned its place. Some nights, after Nora is asleep, I sit on the porch and think about what saving means. In the service, saving is pulling a body from smoke into clean air. Physical, measurable. You did it, or you didn't. Saving Nora is different. It's every morning I make breakfast. Every night I check her room and leave the light on. Every school pickup, every Sunday dinner, every purple wall on a Saturday in April. Saving Nora is a career, not a call, and I intend to serve every shift. If you're listening to this and you have someone you love, call them. Don't wait for Friday. Don't wait for Saturday. Don't wait for routine to remind you. Pick up the phone right now. Tell them you love them. Tell them you're proud. Tell them you'll come if they need you, because the silence comes without warning. And you don't get to choose when it arrives. My name is Walter Grady. I'm 66 years old. Retired firefighter. Portland, Oregon. And every Saturday at 8 in the morning, my granddaughter and I sit at the kitchen table, one coffee, one hot chocolate, and we call Claire's voicemail. It still works. Her voice still answers. Nora says, "Love you, Mommy." I say, "Love you too, kid." And then we start our day.